We've got the leader of the Green Party, Natalie Bennett, in the hot seat today, taking your questions. Richard's in Rubery. Hello, Richard. How are you, mate?
Yeah, hello.
Yeah,
hello,
go on, mate.
Natalie.
Hiya.
To put my cards on the table, I'd like to see high-speed rail stopped. Would the Green Party stop it?
HS2, yeah?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. High speed 2 simply isn't proven as a good use of money. We desperately need a decent transport policy in England, and we haven't got one. And we need to start with walking and cycling, look at supporting and improving local buses, local train routes. There's a whole lot of up and down the country, what I call the low-speed ones. My favourite example is Huddersfield to Sheffield, average speed 29 miles per hour. We need a big investment in public transport in this country, but HS2, which is a rich person's railway, they expect that most of the people travelling on it will be rich, the fares will be high, and there's often big claims made about that this will help development in the Midlands and the North. But I think there's one figure we can take to dispel that, which is the HS2's own figures that says 72% of journeys on it would be people going into London. So it would actually, rather than encouraging...
That arguably, Natalie, could still be very good for the West Midlands. I mean, it could be business people from the West Midlands travelling to London, doing business, getting work, which might then be carried out here in the West Midlands.
But I think what we've seen is over the past couple of decades, an increasing concentration of money and people flowing down physically down into the southeast, into London, and that's the pull of pulling people down into London. The alternative would be if you improve the services around the regions, around the Midlands, around the North, and business people can work with each other from across the region in a manner that means you help regional development, you help provide jobs, opportunities in the Midlands and the North.
But if you don't have enough rail capacity for people to get from one place to another, and we're told that although it's called high speed 2, the real argument in favour of HS2 is the increase in capacity on the railways that it would offer, that would help business locally and nationally and arguably internationally as well.
Well, it's interesting that the arguments keep shifting on why we need HS2. And if it is indeed a capacity argument, then we don't need the high-speed option. And the proposal currently on the table involves using twice the amount of energy that the Eurostar does because it's high-speed 2. It involves demolishing its way through lots of communities, lots of areas of natural beauty, areas of important scientific interest. And if you don't have a high-speed line, then you don't need to do those kind of things. So, perhaps we should just park the whole thing, go back to the table, end up with a transport policy for England that says what do we want to do, and then take that money and spend it wisely.
Richard, has that made you inclined to think about possibly voting Green at some point in the future?
Yeah, she got my vote. She's stopping high-speed rail. She got my vote.
Why are you so anti it, Richard?
Well, for the reasons she just said. I mean, it's a rich man's toy. Like she said, the whole publicity machine was started off built around speed. Oh, we need this speed. Now, it's been demonstrated it's not worth... It only saves, 15, 20 minutes or something, so it's not worth all that cost. So now they're concentrating on, it's not the speed, it's the capacity. We need the capacity. So, like she said, the argument is shifting all the while. And I think it's just a waste of money, and it's going to plough through all these beautiful countryside and all this, we don't need it.
Richard, thanks very much indeed for your call. Let's speak to Ray in Stetchford. Ray, good morning to you. You all right?
Good morning.
Natalie Bennett, the Green Party leader, is in the hot seat taking your calls,
Natalie.
Ray.
How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Every time I hear this argument, I keep shouting at the radio with the same question. How many countries, for example in Europe, never mind worldwide, have actually taken on this new HS2? How many have done it?
How many countries have done it? Well, there are other countries which have high-speed railways, but as Natalie has made...
My question would be, surely we'll get a good idea of the benefits or not, and I'm not really in favour of it. I like the countryside myself, but at least they could say yes or no, or what they've found to be the faults, the benefits, etc., instead of what I keep hearing is people saying, well, I think it will be marvellous for the country because it will create this, it will create jobs. But nobody's using any examples. Now, if other countries have done it, surely that's where you can get a good example, yes or no.
Ray, very interesting point, I think. What about that, Natalie? Do we need to be looking at countries like China, Germany, France, which do have high-speed rail systems, rather than just sort of dismissing it out of hand?
I think we certainly do, but what we need to think about is what's similar about them and what's different about them. And France, for example, is a geographically much larger country than Britain, and high-speed rail has basically replaced what used to be large numbers of internal flights in France. So that's the case in France, but it's not the case in Britain. No one, maybe there's the odd person, but basically people don't fly from Birmingham to London. It wouldn't make any sense at all.
No, they used to. There used to be a service. It's no longer possible. They used to fly from Birmingham to, I think, City Airport in London. Not economically viable, I don't think.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, one of the arguments in those other countries, and including places like China, is that you can use high-speed rail to take lots of planes out of the air, but that's not true for us. And in those countries, I think it's interesting, actually, that France is now going away from new development of TGVs, the high-speed trains, and going towards supporting its local rail networks, because it's recognised that they've very much been neglected, and that's really hurting particularly local economic development. So I think if you take the evidence from those other countries, it's very much the case that they did go very much for high-speed rail in the past, but they're moving away from that now in many cases, particularly France. And the other thing to think about is that we think about transport policy a lot, but we can also think about communications policy, because these days we can have Skype calls, we can have video conference calls, you can have increasingly meetings are being replaced with physical presence with that virtual presence. And if that happens and we build up our telecommunication links, increase the quality of our internet services, then that might be an alternative to extra rail services, and a much more environmentally friendly one. And also, it means that you can do that morning meeting in your pyjamas instead of having to get out of bed at a very early hour of the morning.
Sounds like a great idea, doesn't it? Natalie, thanks very much indeed for joining us.